Good day, lords and ladies, and welcome back to another post-commentary review of Barony Adventure with me, Cornish-Knight, and my co-adventurer, the Fuax. Now, in the last episode, we were basically making our way down through the, I suppose you could call it the catacomb level. I'm not a massive fan of it, to be honest. I've said this several times, and I will continue to say it. But hey-ho. Now then, since this game has been, well, since this game has been recorded, there has been a rather nice little update from the Barony developers. You can check it out on their website. It just adds some nice little features and bits and pieces and highlights items which are, well, blessed items, or things like enchanted items, unenchanted and cursed, like gives them a red highlight around them, which makes it a bit more easier to see what you're doing, so you don't accidentally eat something that's toxic. Now, as you can see here, this is one of these mini presser point trap rooms. And what happens here is I've got relatively a low armor rating at the moment, due to the fact I'm not wearing a shield, and it meant that I got hit and paralysed, which is not particularly fantastic when you're a warrior. I need to put my shield on at the moment, but I keep on forgetting to do it. So I'm just having a bit of a sip of water. The reason being, you see, is the fact that, well, I have rather low perception, and it seems to be affecting me in the way that I can't really see that much. It was explained to me by the Fuax actually that if your perception skill is low, your visibility spectrum in the game actually is reduced. So the reason I'm seeing darkness is partly to do with the fact that my perception is just terrible and I can't see for anything, which is not particularly useful. And more skips. I hate them so much. They almost kill me here. It's unbelievable. The thing is that I should have probably just equipped a shield and be done with it. But hey ho. It's one of these hard things that I find in games, is the fact that you either have one fear or you have the other fear. For example, in this, my bigger fear, or my greater fear at the time, was the darkness and my poor visibility and not being able to see what was coming at me. So I had the torch. Unfortunately, the torch is a rather poor substitute for a shield, especially when I'm carrying a +3 blessed shield, as you can imagine. So, but I do like being actually able to see what's going on, so it's one of these balancing acts, really. I don't like the catacombs, as I said. I especially don't like the fact that with my poor visibility due to my low perception, I really can't see anything at all, so I'd rather actually have a torch out, even if it's a greater risk to my life. And yes, my health is absolutely terrible. I had like a complete and utter daft moment for 2 seconds and I couldn't remember where my AC was. And I just sort of just said not bad, so I'm a knight and wearing heavy armour, so it shouldn't be that bad. Unfortunately, it was rather more terrible than I could have imagined. I was, I think, on 17 rather than on the 20, low 20s that I needed it to be. So as you can imagine, it was not the best situation to be in. Yeah, I just had a daft moment. My brain stopped working for 2 seconds and I couldn't figure out where the AC was. It happens to everyone from time to time. I mean, if I step away from a game, for example, like RimWorld, for example, and it's like, okay, how do I do this again? And it's like, oh, I had to do this. Well, on a side note of that, my RimWorld Let's Plays will be back up. The reason that they're not at the moment is pretty much due to the fact that because of how my internet works where I live, I can only have so many videos uploaded a day, and I tend to want to, if I've done like a playthrough of Barony, I tend to want to put a new Barony video up every day, which pushes out my current series. And as my current series at the moment was Salt and Sanctuary, a really nice, dark, grim, I say Castlevania meets Dark Souls game. Check it out, it's a really good game, and check out my Let's Play series of it. It's enjoyable, I've been told. No non-biased opinion entirely, I assure you. But obviously I can't have only 2 series going at a time. It's not really that enjoyable for people, especially when I have several things on the go. So I end up having to... I completely missed a troll there for 2 seconds, you know. It's like, troll, oh well, I can grab the treasure. What we were trying to do, what the Fuax was trying to do was aggro the troll so that the shopkeeper attacked him. Unfortunately, he misses and hits the shopkeeper, which is a pretty bad thing to do. He was trying to hit the troll, he hit the shopkeeper, and okay, let me just say this right now. Shopkeepers in this game, bar none, are some of the most dangerous, I suppose you call them mob units or mob enemies that you come across. They are obscenely powerful. Obscenely powerful. I mean, demons, minotaurs, you name it, they kill it. I mean, I'm pretty sure that the shopkeepers are in fact immortal, or at least invulnerable to damage. They are. I mean, there is a tactic in the game. I haven't used it myself because I tend to flee the minotaur. But the tactic is to basically get the minotaur to aggro the shopkeeper, because obviously his hammer, I think, has a small area of effect when it hits a spot. Is to get the minotaur to aggro the shopkeeper, and then for them to kill each other, because obviously the minotaur can't kill the shopkeeper, and the shopkeeper can definitely kill the minotaur. But obviously that takes a massive risk. As you can see, my line of sight is terrible. I can't see anything at this point. I mean, it's enjoyable. I mean, it's nerve-wrackingly terrifying. Oh look, troll around the corner in the dark. I mean, how bad can that go, right? Answer: pretty bad. I mean, trolls are one of the more terrifying enemies that you meet in the game, and the reason being is the fact that they don't actually aggro unless you're right next to them. It can cause you real issues. Now, as you can imagine, this level contains, as you can see, a secret room, and this secret room is the Minotaur's maze. Now, that is not a particularly nice place to go. Interestingly, I believe the Minotaur's maze actually wait, I know the myth about the Minotaur's maze, which is, it is on the island of Crete, and it was the Minotaurian civilization. Really interesting. If you guys want actual really good interesting stories to read up on like the, what you call them, like Greek fables or Aesop's fables, or just like Greek legends in general. They actually are really gruesome and really entertaining. Just trying to, I mean, like the Trials of Hercules are like a classic one, and Another Troll. Just finish it off. They have really good XP. Just various folklore stories. I mean, the Greek ones are like the classics with Jason and the Argonauts and Hercules and Troy. The actual story of Troy is really interesting, and sort of like Icarus and all that kind of stuff. All those sort of Greek legends are really quite entertaining. I like folklore stories. I like stuff like Beowulf and all that kind of stuff. The actual original sort of saga is really interesting, and partly I believe was some of the inspiration that Tolkien had to do Lord of the Rings, because he saw the very rich folklore, like classic folklore traditions that a lot of like Norwegian sort of, like, I suppose, like Nordic, not Nordic, that's not the right term, but sort of like Scandinavian and Norway and Denmark, those kind of countries had, and the fact that ours had sort of, I suppose, had faded away, I suppose you could call it. The Victorians did actually quite a lot of damage to our folklore traditions. If you look at the Brothers Grimm tales, folklore tales, fairy tales, Brothers Grimm's fairy tales, they actually, for a long period of time, they were rather edited because of sensibilities, and it's really, I mean, I've got a copy of the book myself, the unedited version, which is really nice, and the difference is quite telling. It's they leave a lot of stuff out, like pregnancies and all that kind of stuff, so it's really quite interesting. But no, I mean, the Minotaurian civilization actually existed, and they did the whole like leaping the bull. I mean, leaping the bull is or like jumping the bull, leaping the bull is actually quite interesting. But I should talk about that in a moment, because we are about to. The chase of the bulls, as you can see on the map, we are being hunted down by the Minotaur herself, and she is rather OP. I mean, she's considered to be the second hardest boss in the game. She's considered to be actually a really terrifying opponent to face. Plus the fact that, like all Minotaurs in this game, she can just ignore walls by smashing through them, which, as you can see, is a pretty terrifying concept. I suppose we could have probably gone back and got the magical spear with the pacing that we had, but to be honest, I just wanted to flee. I don't like the Minotaur. I find the Minotaur absolutely terrifying, and I was there desperately trying to hack down the door as my companion is coming, half terrified that the Minotaurs would have kicked down through the front door. And we legged it. Not the most sort of like heroic way of doing that level, but it's how I do. And now we are on to the final level. I think it's like the castle. I think it's called the castle, or the. Yeah, I think it is the castle, like abandoned castle or subterranean castle. The lore for this game is actually really interesting. Basically, the Baron, if you guys do not know, well, they had like this village mining in, like this mining village or mining like town, and what happens is one day a new Baron arrives, and he basically demands them to mine for gold in the mountains, even though that gold has never been found before, and he's like has a real lust for money and wealth, and he taxes them very heavily and pushes them very hard. So eventually what happens is that they tell him that they have struck a massive gold vein or gold deposit in the deepest part of the mine, and he descends into it to take stock of it himself. And then what they do is that they seal up the mine behind him and sort of leave him to his fate. But not everything goes to plan, and it was sort of to be guessed at. I mean, in that kind of situation, I mean, to come back as a lech is a pretty nasty thing, because if you guys don't know what lechs are, they're basically sort of like undead beings. Well, historically, as a lech is someone who's taken the soul out of their body, I believe, and you put it in a phylactery, and you hide the phylactery away, which is where your soul is. And as long as the soul container and your soul is undamaged, you can't die. Your physical body can take massive amounts of damage and just remain intact, and you just put yourself back together or like reform over time. So yeah, I mean, I always was under the impression that lechers basically had to be like medical training, because extracting your body was supposed to be extracting your soul from your body was supposed to be a rather challenging thing. I love it. By the time you sort of get to this level, and yeah, I do realize I just killed off an NPC, but hey ho, these things happen. But I love it. You get to this level and like blows just bounce off your armor. It's fantastic. It still doesn't stop me from poisoning myself though. there's one thing I've learnt in this game, is that no matter how tough your armour is, you can always die from poisoned water. Remember folks, boil your water before drinking it, because that's how you can catch cholera. Well, actually, technically cholera is contaminated water. And don't ask what they contaminate it with, because it is not pleasant. No, but the thing is, I was always under the impression that lectures, you had to be like, basically it was like wizards. They were like wizards that had basically learnt how to do this particular thing and had siphoned off their soul and put it to one side. I know you can get revenants, which are basically sort of dead bodies possessed by demons. I suppose the archetype of like version of a revenant are the ones that you sort of get in, if we're talking about the games, would sort of be in like Dragon Age, the first Dragon Age Origins. They're pretty supposed to be quite powerful, but I suppose he must have had magical training. I mean, this is a fantasy world, and wealth and education seems to play a large part in. Yeah, I know, I completely did not see the spike trap, and I'm almost dead now because of it, which was really frustrating. But it seems to be in fantasy worlds that like education and wealth plays quite a large part in who actually gets to be wizards. God, I hate gnomes. I hate them so much. No, if you don't know, I just hate gnomes in this game. They are one of the most infuriating mob enemies that you can come across, partly because they all go in groups, evil little blighters that they are. You know, you can get swarmed by like 6 of them, and they either are armed with a pickaxe or with a lightning staff, which is just absolutely fantastic, because obviously magical abilities bypass a lot of your armour, so if you're playing an armoured character like me, they pretty much rip you to bits. And as I'm sure you've already guessed from playing this game, or if you've watched some of my Let's Plays, the magical reflection or magical resistant items that you can get in the game, unless you stack multiple magical resistance items, it's not that effective. I mean, I think I had like 3 or 4, I think I had 2 or 3 bits of equipment on which was magical resistance. But yeah, it's just not good. Not good at all. Furak had a problem. He seems to hit bugs in more often than I do. I don't know why that is. Maybe because I'm the host, but he couldn't recruit characters. But anywho, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at it in like an RPG terms, like if you look at like in like D&D or any of the, like the really other hardcore RPGs, if you like play a magic character, they either tend to have like a noble background, or they've like specialised in being like a mage or a wizard. Like if basically if you go into the sciences, you specialise in being a scientist, or the sciences, you could be like a chemist or mathematician or biologist or archaeologist or geologist. But you sort of, if you don't sort of go into it with a lot of money, you end up sort of doing it purely as a dedicated career option, rather as it being, oh, I'd like to learn a bit of magic because that seems really interesting. It's, if you don't have the money, it's, I'm doing this because it's a job and I'm going to get paid for it at the end of the day. So it's interesting. I mean, historically the upper classes actually had better education because that was so close, so close. Because historically what would happen was that after a certain point you would have to go out to work because your family needed the extra money being brought in. I mean, there was actually quite a lot of resentment at the time in Britain, for example, when they brought in minimum working age and that all kids had to go to school. If you were under a certain age, kids had to go to school, and that you couldn't employ, and then when it was then changed that you couldn't employ children in the workplace, I think it was either under the age of 18 or under the age of 16, like minimum minimum age of employment, that kicked up a lot of fuss because a lot of poor families, especially if they had a lot of kids, were using them to basically get extra money by going off and doing work, even though it was massively dangerous. I mean, you had children working down in mines, I mean mostly coal mines. I mean, where I live down in Cornwall, you had a lot of tin and copper mining, and that is really hard work, because obviously you're digging through a lot of like hard rock like granite and serpentine to get at these metal ores. So, and you don't get them in big seams, they're quite narrow seams, and you have to like follow them down, and like there's a lot of mines in Cornwall which actually go underneath the seabed and go out to sea because you're chasing the deep veins of ore. It's not a particularly nice or safe profession, and a lot of people died doing it. And then you had and then you had like the women and children would be on the surface going through all the like processing on the surface and sort of checking to make sure that no ore had been left behind. It was a pretty hard existence, really hard. And children did it. I mean, in the Industrial Revolution, you had children as young as like 6 and 5, 6 and 7 working in really dangerous conditions under really unsafe machinery. It's a lot of people died. I mean, if you look at stuff like in Mary Poppins with like the chimney sweeps, that used to be a child's role. The children used to sweep chimneys because they were small enough to fit up them, and that was really hazardous. I mean, breathing in basically carbon like coal dust and all, like, because it's not just coal dust, you're going to have other stuff like arsenic and all that kind of stuff that accumulates over time in chimneys. It was really unpleasant and really dangerous. A lot of people died. A lot of children died. I mean, infant mortality was really high in the Victorian period. Like in the industrial period in Britain, like in the 18th and 19th centuries, infant mortality was really high. Young children mortality was really high. It was bad, really bad. And there was not a lot of education because your parents needed you to work. Luckily my armour deflected that arrow. I mean, I'm not saying it was better in the medieval period. I mean, it was pretty grim in the medieval period. Life expectancy was relatively low. I think mid-40s. Mid-40s, and I think most people, if you were like working class, if you lived a good age, if you lived to 50, at like 250, most people would probably die before then. I'm trying to remember the exact, that's like an age range, but I think 50 in the medieval period was sort of like considered to you've lived a full and happy life if you've lived to 50, and if you've lived to like mid-40s, you've lived quite a reasonable life in the medieval period. And because obviously if you're a peasant, it's going to be back-breaking work and poor diet and disease, and if you basically get conscripted by the local lord to go off to fight for him, or if you get attacked by brigands and bandits, because that happened as well, all that kind of stuff, it was not nice. I mean, even if you managed to get out of it by becoming a monk or something, it wasn't particularly pleasant. That's the end of it today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've all enjoyed. Please press the like button or the subscription button if you wish to follow me. I shall catch you all next time. Goodbye.